when we're offering a land honoring, it's really important to recognize, if you look on your Padlet, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for just a moment. At the top of the screen, so grateful. Thank you so much for your posts, everybody. So at the top of the Padlet, you see the opening here, Spanish to English, right? And there are a couple of resources that are really important that we wanted to share. So when we're opening Circle, there's a lot of resources here where it says Native Land Digital. If you're on another, I know some of you are other places, if you'd like to share whose land you're on as we're doing this work today, please feel free to put that in the chat to acknowledge that. But since I'm in Milwaukee, I'm sharing where I'm from, and that's traditionally how we've been doing this work here. But offering a land honoring is more than just that. It's really important to acknowledge the land, but also important to be aware of the work and how people who are indigenous to the land that we're on would like to be supported, and how would they like to work with folks. And so it's important to ask those questions and do more than just offer the land honoring, but actually do work that's supportive of Indigenous communities. Here I have a centerpiece, and today really we're thinking about this as sacred space. I really believe that life is sacred, children's lives are sacred, and so when we hold sacred space and do this work, we think about this as a ceremony. And so this is a picture of a beautiful centerpiece that we used at Alliance when I was holding space with our staff. Tina, you want to get us started on the connections?
Absolutely. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be back here at LACCS. It's been a long time for me. I did this work with LACCS many, many years ago, so it's good to be here. I just wanted to remind everyone, I realized when I came on that my name was not my name. At the bottom of my little Zoom square, it said Zoom webinar. So take a moment to take a look at your Zoom square to see that the name that you would like to be referenced and your preferred pronouns are there, so that during the day we can all talk to each other. And I'll give you a minute to do that real quick. All right. And then I want to invite you to, if you have a scrap piece of paper that you can do a little doodle or write a word, that would be great. Otherwise, you can always do a pose in your Zoom square here too. But I'm going to invite you to do a little doodle or word that captures where you're at today. How are you feeling as we begin this day? So I did my little, hopefully with the background you can see this. I'm going to try to get it. Let's see. It doesn't work well with Zoom backgrounds. But I don't know, can you see that? No.
See it. We see a little, we see an eye.
See an eye?
There it
is. And zoom back. I don't think you can see it, but if you could see my drawing, it's a puppy and a very tired person, because I have a brand new puppy that is keeping me up all night. And so where I'm at today as we start the day is a little bit sleepy, but a little bit a lot excited to be here. So and that's another reason I have a Zoom background up, is because this puppy might be making introductions, like the cat that just joined us. Yay. That's Chip, the cat.
Tina, if you put
so yeah, take a moment to do a doodle or a word that captures where you're at, or you could pose too. So my pose would be this. And then take a moment to kind of peek through all the different pictures and see how people are feeling.
And for those of you who don't want to have your camera on right now, you're welcome to throw a word in the chat.
Good idea.
Thank you, everybody.
I see a lot of words in the chat, so feel free to page through those too.
Okay, I'm going to keep this moving, everybody. Thank you so much, Tina.
Thank you.
So, you know what, you all, I feel like this is a very slow start today. And I just want to say, I was looking at some sort of, different thinking about this time of the year. And, we're really receiving guidance to move slowly into the year. And so I hope that you're all being kind to yourself as you move into this time. So we've talked about in our work with LACCS, we've talked about moving through change, right? And really embracing the principles. So today, what we really want to do is to continue that work and really learn about what's possible when we observe ourselves in our own resistance to change, and then look at, as we change and experience growth, right? Supporting other people through that. And when we're aware of our own resistance and how we move through that change, we can oftentimes be much more compassionate with other people as they're moving through their resistance to change. So our intention is to engage you in restorative practices, right? Because restorative practices it's about doing the work, right? And so we're going to engage you in restorative practices today to support you as you deepen the implementation of a particular principle. And so by the end of the day, we intend for you each to have a specific action that is rooted from within you. And that's really what our focus is going to be, okay? And so with that, Iman and Tina, is there anything else you'd like to say? I think we should talk a little bit about who we are and why we're here and what our understanding and experience is with restorative practice and in our impact on the impact on our lives. And so I'm going to hand it over to Iman and then Tina and just talk about that so that you can understand who we are and where we're coming from as we do this work today.
Hello, everyone. My name is Iman Fahmi. I'm actually Heather's daughter. I'm currently a student at School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and I'm on winter break right now, so I'm back in Milwaukee. But I've pretty much grown up around circle work and restorative practice work my whole life. And because my mom is her work is so ingrained in every aspect of her life, of course it leaked over into my childhood. So I remember from an early age facilitating circles with my two siblings whenever they would fight over a toy or something like that. But yeah, restorative practice and circle work is something that's very near and dear to my heart, and it's definitely had a huge impact on my emotional maturity and growth as I've gone through different stages of life, and I still use it between my roommates or still between my siblings. So yeah, it's a wonderful and very valuable practice.
Thank you, Iman. I'm Tina Owen Moore now, Dr. Tina Owen Moore. I've had a long background with restorative practices, and that's where Heather and I got to know each other as well. I was the co-founder of the Alliance School in Milwaukee, where Heather was also a teacher, and it was the first school in the nation started with the mission of addressing bullying and teaching others to do the same. So everything that we did was about character education, anti-bullying, creating safe and inclusive spaces for all students. And so I've been connected with LACCS quite a bit also over the years because I was an Alverno grad master's student as well. And now I am the superintendent of schools in the Cudahy School District, where I'm trying to take some of the lessons that we learned from restorative practices. So my first experience with restorative practices was I didn't want to go to a 4-day training, and people kept trying to tell me this is a great thing, you should go. And I had this conflict situation with 4 girls that had been ongoing for weeks, and they were fighting and arguing, and police were involved, and there were tickets, and it was gang connected and all kinds of things. And I just didn't know what to do anymore. And Pat LaCoke actually invited me to come to was asking me to come to the training. And so I asked her to help me with this situation. And if it worked, I'd go to the training. So she came in and did a circle with that group of students. And by the end of the circle, the students were apologizing to each other. I got up the next day in front of the whole school community and apologized to the whole community, and we never had an issue again. And so it really sold me on the restorative practices, and I made sure our whole staff was trained after that. And now I just live in that space of always using circles and using restorative practices as a way to do the work. And so it's living and breathing in my superintendency, and I hope that it'll be really valuable to you too.
Thank you, Tina. So when I met all of you, a number of you at the beginning of the year, I talked about who I am, Heather Sattler. And Tina always encourages me to say Dr. Heather Sattler. And so I will, because Tina, will you say what you usually say, especially about around our young people, because I think it's important.
Yeah, the kids won't want to be you if they can't see you. And so I just really believe that by saying doctor, it gives our students an opportunity to know that you can be a doctor of anything. And I have like a fourth grader whose name is Tina, who went home and told her mom, can I be a Dr. Tina someday too? And so I just think that it's great representation, especially for our young women out there in the world who maybe don't realize that this is possible.
Thank you, Tina. So I actually taught in Milwaukee Public Schools for 26 years, and 11 of those years at the Alliance School, and really fortunate and blessed to do the work of restorative practice. And I always name Yvette Morel, who's my first teacher, who hails from the Blackfoot Nation, who taught me so much of the beauty and the wisdom and the sacredness of the circle. And just, I was so grateful to be able to partner with her and learn, and to create work with her and with our young people, and with an alliance to create community restorative practices facilitated by our young people. And for the last 8 or 9 years, I've been doing that work in the city of Milwaukee, and working with former students and current students, as well as people within the justice system, to shift how we work with our young people. So that is work that is really near and dear to me. And I'm currently really grateful to be working with Tina again at the Cudahy School District as the restorative practices coordinator there. And my intention is to really work with our young people and the entire community as we partner to grow the work within the district and within the city. And so when I think about restorative practice, just so you understand, really think about it as a way of being. And it's inspired by Indigenous tradition, and what restorative practices support us in doing are cultivating that relationship that we have with ourselves, which is essential, and our relationship with other people. And so it's really important that we begin with community building, and we start with ourselves. So the way that the day is designed today gives you a chance to check in with yourself, to connect with other people, and then check back in with yourself as you lead. So that is really the framing of the day today. So now I'd like you all to, we're going to move into a meditation. So you are welcome to, if you want to lay down and turn off your screen, if you want to stay sitting up really tall and find your feet flat on the ground and really feel your sits bones, and roll your shoulders up to your ear and exhale down your back. If you're somebody who works better doing a moving meditation, you go ahead and you do that. But what we're going to do is we're going to do a meditation, and we're going to move through our bodies, because our bodies offer us so much wisdom. And I'm going to ask you just to notice what's happening in your body. And we're going to come back to a particular place in your body where you might feel a bit of a sensation, and really see what's being held there. And we're going to be doing this in a short window of time. So I'm going to invite you to work with what you feel comfortable working with during this period of time. And if you're someone who doesn't like to do meditation, I just invite you to sit and hold the space and enjoy some moment of stillness with my voice, okay? And if for some reason something rises up within you and you need some extra support, please message me or one of the LACCS team, okay? All right, everybody, we're gonna begin. So again, finding a comfortable position, a nice tall spine. And we're going to begin by observing our bodies and ourselves with a sense of curiosity. If you want to lower your gaze or close your eyes, You begin by feeling the ground beneath your feet. Feel that strong earth energy pulling you down. If you're lying down, just allow your body to sink into that. And now, starting at the top of your head, begin just to notice and observe with curiosity the sensations that you have in your body and any thoughts or emotions that rise up as we move through. So beginning with the top of your head, your crown, going down your forehead, the back of your head, going down through the area by your jaw, noticing how your tongue is sitting in your mouth, moving down to your throat, moving down to your shoulders, allowing your attention to move down your arms all the way down to your fingertips. Now bringing your attention back up to your chest, your heart, in the front and the back. Moving through the center of your body. Noticing your belly and your back. Paying attention how your body responds to you giving it this loving attention, observing with curiosity. Moving down to the area between your belly button and your pelvic bone, just noticing the front and the back of your body. And then allowing your attention to travel from your seat, down your legs, all the way down to the bottoms of your feet. Once you've done that, give yourself a nice deep breath. And now I invite you to focus on an area of your body where you might have noticed a sensation that had you curious. So take some time just to be present with that area of your body. Allow your attention to return to it. And as you focus your attention there, I invite you to pay attention to the sensation, as well as any images that you see, any thoughts that come to mind, anything that engages any of your senses. And as you engage with this, I want to invite you to ask yourself, what story is being held in this part of my body that I'm paying attention to right now? And if you don't have an answer, that's okay. Just take some time and listen and observe. Once you have a sense of that story, just taking in a deep breath. And even if you don't, that's okay too. Now, taking your attention and sending it downward, down underneath the bottoms of your feet, through the ground, into the earth. I invite you to see any color of light that first appears to you. And then inhaling that up through the bottoms of your feet, all the way up through the top of your head to the sky, and exhaling that back down. And I invite you to do that a few times just to release whatever you might be holding that you don't want to carry with you. Just releasing into the earth for recycling and renewal, and then bringing that light back up to your heart and just expanding it all the way around your body. Now taking a moment and thinking about whatever story you might have been holding in that place. And I invite you to connect with the loving truth of who you are, the core of your being. And I invite you to recreate that story to more accurately reflect who you are, the loving truth of who you are. Once you've done that, taking in a nice deep breath. And finally, taking a moment to feel what it is to be that new story. Allow yourself to feel it in your entire body. How does it feel? What does it look like to be that story? Take a moment to sit in that. And once you've done that, I invite you just to offer gratitude for what you've created in this moment. And also gratitude for what you have in your life. And so now I invite you to take in another deep breath. And as you do that a couple more times, when you're ready, I invite you to open up your eyes if they were closed, or bring your gaze up. Or if you were lying down, just give your fingers and your hands a little wiggle. Maybe move on to your right side. You don't need to rush and get up. Take your time. And slowly bring yourself back up, back to this moment. And so I put a question in the chat, and so you are welcome to journal or comment in the chat. What did you notice about this process, and how is what you experienced during the meditation related to the principle or the principles that you wrote about earlier today? And if you don't find a connection, that's okay, but I would invite you just to take a moment to notice the process. And this reflection is really meant to be for you, but if there's something that you feel compelled to share, please feel free to put it in the chat. We're going to continue to learn from each other all day today. Thank you, Tina. Thank you so much for your reflections. And if you fell asleep, that is what your body needed. What I so appreciate about the work of restorative practice is that this work lives inside of all of us and that we are all connected and that we all have wisdom to know. And that there are many ways to do this work and many ways to be. And love is at the heart of it. So thank you for your reflections. Thank you so much for your reflections. I can feel them. My heart's filling up. So Lauren, what you wrote, I was thinking about a conversation I had with Renette yesterday, and Renette was talking about how, and Renette, please feel free to chime in if I misquote, but we were talking about the power of really slowing down and how that is an important resistance, right? And so I want to invite all of us as we engage in the work of restorative practice today to really, really listen to ourselves. Please listen to your body. Please listen to your thoughts. And please pay attention to what's in your heart And as we move through the day, if you notice any tightening, I just invite you to simply observe with a loving curiosity. When I have done this meditation in the past, something that is really powerful that really sticks with me is this idea of perfection and having to be perfect. And what I've come to is that perfection is limiting, and I am love and love is limitless. And so I just invite us as we continue to do this work to pay attention to that. And also, if you notice this thought or idea rising up within you, understand that it comes from a way that you were taught, something that you learned. And when we think badly about ourselves and about other people, it's because we've been taught badly and others have been taught badly. And so what I invite us to do is to continue to pay attention, and to, if that story rises up again, just understand that it's a part of you asking for your attention. And I invite you to pay attention to that part of yourself and be curious. Be curious about that part of yourself, the story that you're holding, and wonder where that came from. And really take some time to understand that part of yourself through writing, through movement, through conversation. And then perhaps looking at and recognizing that you have the power to change that story to reflect the loving truth of who you are. And however you want to write that, whether it's something that you write and you post on your mirror or in another place, I invite you to remember that you truly are the author of your own story. And with that, we're going to invite you to take a break for about 10 minutes. And I'm going to ask Lauren if you would just please play some music for us. So we're going to come back here at 9:40. Thank you so much for your generous.
Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm gonna be explaining and introducing the circle process. So now that we have focused on the circle within us, we're going to engage in the circle to build community with others. And we would like you to please bring what you learned from the journaling and the meditation into the circle. So we will be going onto the Padlet, and once on Padlet, choose 2 facilitators and 1 timekeeper. One facilitator will read as well as answer questions. The other facilitator will write down the order in which people first answer the questions and help to keep the same order by reminding everyone of it throughout the circle. They will also answer questions. The timekeeper will let the group know when there's 5 minutes left before returning to the large group. This will be at 10:35. The basic and sacred guidelines of the circle are: number 1, speak and listen from the heart. Respect confidentiality unless someone says that they're going to harm themselves or someone else. Then one of the facilitators will directly message Heather or the LACCS team. Number 3, listen without interrupting. Be present and just take in information that people are offering up without interrupting, and give people that space to share their stories. Number 4, share generously and be mindful of leaving space for all the people in the circle. And number 5, you're welcome to pass if you don't wish to speak, or ask any of the facilitators to come back to you.
Iman, if I could just add, what we really wanted is to give you an opportunity to hold space with each other. So when Iman is done explaining this section, right, we're going to invite you to be in community with each other. We heard you that you want to be able to connect with people from other communities. So all of us are going to be put into random breakout rooms. And I would dare say, though, that there is some design in the way the breakout rooms work out. But you'll have an opportunity to do that. So we want you to choose the facilitators and the timekeepers. And so the directions are on the Padlet. I'm going to throw the guidelines up there as well when we're done. Okay, honey, go ahead.
Yeah. And so just like a note prior to going into this, the questions that will be asked in circle are intentionally similar to the questions you guys had while journaling, because we wanted to provide you all with a space to connect your stories with your reflections, and learn from each other. And prior to, oh, excuse me, sorry. And I just want to say that the purpose of the circle is to focus on implementation of character education principles in communities, reflect on relationship to principles, and determine an action that is fueled by the strength of our communities. So, yes, that is my little introduction.
Thank you so much, Iman. So I'm gonna stop sharing now. I'm gonna send to breakout rooms.
Heather, could you please notice that in the chat, there are some people who are in physical spaces together, and so they would like to have that be that breakout space?
Thank you. You know what? That was one of the things that we wanted to offer. So I'm still going to make random breakout rooms, but if you are a group of people who are holding space with each other, please do hold space with each other. It's really nice to have a circle together with your community and grab a talking piece. A talking piece is a piece that we hold when we're together that has significant meaning. And I'll just share an example. See this little beautiful rock here? It's in the shape of a heart. Whew, I don't know if you can see it well. But my son Elias harvested this for me, and he said, "Mom, this is from Eagle River from Long Lake." And he said, "Mom, I want you to take this and use this as a talking piece for your circle. Look, it's a heart, and circle is all about love." So if you are with your community and you have a talking piece, you can use it. And when you're in circle with the group virtually, if you have something that you'd like to just share as a talking piece, you can do that as well. Okay, so if you're with a group, like I said, and you have a community that's together, just let the other people who are there know. All right, everybody. Tina, before we go over to you, I want to take a moment and just acknowledge what people wrote in the chat. I like the background. Anybody want to jam? Oh, okay. I like the dancing. Okay. So thanks, Christy. You're talking about having space to speak is powerful. And Tim really talking about going through the questions gave you an opportunity to build on each other's ideas. And Kristen, you also talked about the opportunity to really be heard. I have a good friend named Carolyn Moynihan Bratt, who I think is 79 years old now. And she talks about how we hear each other into speech. And that resonates so deeply with me. Christopher, you said just the chance to share and connect. Angela, you talked about an opportunity for reflection and sharing and felt open-minded and safe. I'm so grateful to that there was so much respect in that space and give people to recognize commonalities. And then Kat, sound like you really expanded on what was there and what needed to rise up. One thing I love about the circle, it's wonderful to have a flow of questions and an intention, and also to allow what's within us to come through us. And I love that. I love that you access that. And yep, we are jamming. And thank you, Courtney, for talking about the opportunity to really feel validated in this space. Okay, Dr. Tina.
Thank you. Before we get started with this piece, I just wanted to mention something that came out of our group. Just the question of how does restorative practices fit into this character education work that we're doing? And so I talked about, both Iman and I were in the same group, and so we were able to talk about how we see it as a way to get to the character education principles that we're trying to get to. It becomes a way of being and a way of practicing, so that when you're problem solving, when you're building community, when you're repairing harm, the circle process is there to help you do those things. And it's not always a circle process, as you're going to see in this next piece, in the immunity to change piece. We're going to talk a little bit about how do we do this work internally, because all change is hard. There was research that showed that if 6 people are given the news that they will die if they don't change a behavior in 6 months, only 1 out of 6 people will make that change. Like, that's how hard change is. Even when you have the great motivating factor there, change is really hard. And so the work that you are all doing in your schools and in your communities is change work. You're trying to change culture. You're trying to change practices. And so being able to look at how you do that organizationally and how you do that internally and what some of those barriers might be to that kind of change, I think is really critical. And in my doctoral program, I was able to learn a little bit about the immunity to change process, why people don't change, and how we can use the immunity to change process to help us with that change, whether that's organizationally or individually. We attached a video on there of Lisa Leahy, who was my professor, working with Brene Brown on her immunity to change process. And so if you have a chance later on, watch it. It's really powerful, or listen to it. It's a podcast. It's really powerful in kind of getting an understanding and hearing yourself in that message. But being aware of our own resistance to change is really key. So what we're going to do today is we're going to work through a little bit of an immunity to change process steeped in the principle that you're trying to leverage right now. What is that principle you decided that you or your school district needs to work on, and how that might be showing up for you on an individual basis? And so this is almost an individual circle process, because it kind of has a 4-question format too. Not intentionally, but it just goes to show how the circle process keeps showing up. I'm just looking to see if there's anything else. If you have printed out the immunity to change map, that's very helpful. I had it sent to you, and it's linked on the Padlet also. But you can also just draw this out on a piece of paper. And this is a tool that I use often now, and I'm using with my team to do some district-wide work on what do we need to do? What are our immunities to change, and how can we improve our practices? And one of our goals right now is just to improve our meeting practices, because we realize that we have to do that. Our leadership team has to do that if we're going to be able to lead the work that we're trying to change. And so this process, it takes you through what you're trying to do, what's working against you. Thank you for sharing that. That's perfect. The hidden competing commitments and the big assumptions. And it actually invites you into a process of testing those assumptions over time. So we're just going to touch on this today. Like, this process can be weeks and months, and you can work with coaches to do the process. It's really powerful. But today, I just want everybody to kind of get that insight into what kind of barriers might be preventing you from change. So if you think about that principle that you decided that you wanted to work on, what was that goal that you wanted to work on, either individually or for your school community? Think about yourself. And what would you have to do better at to get your community to that goal? A lot of times we don't think about that piece. So think about yourself individually. And what would you have to do better at to get your school community to that goal? If you have your worksheet there, you can write that in that space that says improvement goal, that small square at the top. Don't list any actions below it at all. If there's a, and feel free to ask questions along this process. I think talking about this out loud will be really healthy for us. So feel free to turn on your mic and ask a question if you have a question about. So I will share that my improvement goal would be, I have to start looking at our meeting agendas sooner and planning for it. Right? Like that's what's gonna be making our meetings better. If I look at the agenda sooner and start putting the agenda together sooner. I sometimes wait till the last minute, but that we'll talk more about that. But my goal would be to plan my agenda sooner. My improvement goal. Anybody want to share an improvement goal that you know you would have to get better at to help your school move to that goal?
I think my improvement goal would be I spend the whole semester like putting marbles into the jar with my students and building trust and building relationships. And then when we have assessments and I have to critique them or give them feedback that is negative, I see an emotional shift that I've taken the marbles out of the jar. So I need to find a better way to make it not feel hurtful or to be finger pointing or you did it wrong or you did it bad. We already use like positive constructive criticism, but sometimes I do have to say you haven't done this correctly. You need to do it differently going forward. And I want to do that without causing harm.
Oh, that's powerful. So your improvement goal is to provide feedback without causing harm. Or something along those lines, but yeah, like to be able to provide feedback without people responding as if it's harm, right? Good one. Anyone else want to share an improvement goal? It's hard, it's very vulnerable to share goals and to share this process. All right, if you've got that improvement goal down, then take a moment and think about what are you doing instead of doing that? So I mentioned I would have to start looking at my agenda sooner and planning my agenda sooner. So what am I doing instead? This goes in the behaviors that work against my goal. So these are all the things I'm doing instead of doing that. I'm waiting until the last minute to plan the agenda. I am saying yes to a million other meetings and commitments so that my calendar gets so full that I don't have time to look at the agenda until right before the meeting. What else am I doing instead of planning the agenda? I'm thinking about it, and yet I'm not putting it down in a public space or working with my team to develop that agenda well. We're all kind of doing the same thing. Like everybody looks at it at the last minute. So I'm modeling that. And let's see, what else? I've tried to pass on the leadership for facilitating the agenda, and it hasn't changed what's happening there. It still ends up being the same thing. We're kind of throwing it together at the last minute. So there's a bunch of things that I'm doing that instead of doing my goal. So take about 5 minutes to write that down, like really reflect on that. What are you doing instead of your goal on a daily basis? I'm gonna put my timer on. Okay, everybody got a good list there? My struggle is always to honor the full amount of time. It always feels like too long. All right. I thought of a few more behaviors that were working against my goals in there. I had this realization when I was writing this list out that I did the same thing as a teacher. On the night before class, I was always creating my lesson plan and changing my mind and researching a million things, trying to find the perfect thing and spending way too much time like overthinking it and not actually getting it done. And so like that was my aha as I wrote that. So I'm thinking about it. I think that there's a better answer. I'm thinking that there's a better thing out there and I haven't quite figured it out yet. And then when it comes to the moment that I have to put it down because we have to have the meeting, I have to put it down. And I think it's not the best thing then either. It's more harried. So, and then I realized too that the other behavior, I'm not setting expectations for myself or others around when it should be done, what it should look like, what those priorities are. And so Those were some ahas for me. Is there anybody that would like to share a little bit about their goal and behaviors that came to you that you're doing instead of your goal? Or one behavior? How about everybody add in the chat one behavior that you're doing instead of your goal? This way you can be you can be as vulnerable or not vulnerable as you want to be with the group too. So in the chat, one behavior that you're doing instead of your goal.
A lot of answers are pouring through in the chat.
Yes, these are powerful. Take a look at these if you're not seeing them too. Assuming everyone has the same values, I don't plan ahead, procrastinate, studying more, learning more, praying. Feel that. Worrying about it. Falling down the rabbit hole of side ideas. That is my never-ending struggle, I think, Julie. All right, we got some good behaviors that are working against those goals here. So now thinking about, now this is where it gets a little tricky. You have to figure out what are you worried about with each of these. So if you take that behavior, the thing about the immunity to change process is it helps you see that the behaviors that are stopping you are also your survival skills in the world. They're the things that have gotten you to where you are today. They're the things that have made you successful. And so that's why it's so hard to change, because sometimes the change that you need to make is a change that takes you away from something that's a real value of you too. And I think the immunity to change process helps you to see how you can put the practices on and off that you need for the varying situations. So the worry box, what are you worried about? So I talked about how I'll wait thinking that there's going to be a better idea. There's going to be, I keep thinking about it, keep thinking about it, keep thinking about it. I guess I'm worried that I'm not going to do the thing that we need. Like I'm worried that I'm not going to get it right, right? I'm worried that there's something better out there. I'm worried that something's going to happen in the world and it's going to change what we need to do. And I'm going to be too stuck on one idea. Let's see. And the filling up my calendar one, I'm worried that, I know this is a whole different change process thing that I have to think about, but for that one, I know I'm worried about saying no, that people will feel like I'm not being responsive. And so that's a whole different one, but I'm going to focus on the piece of, always thinking that there's a better idea. I'm worried that I'm not going to do the right thing for my team. I'm not going to do the best thing possible for my team. So that would be what I would write in that worry box. I'm worried I'm not going to do the best thing possible with my team, make the best use of our time. So if you have a worry that came to you, write that in that worry box. All right. So your competing commitments are kind of the opposite of that. What are you committed to doing then? So I am committed to making sure my team has the best. Right? That I'm giving my team my best. I'm committed to creating the best experiences possible with my team. That sounds counterintuitive, right? Because by not getting there, I'm not doing it. But my commitment, the competing commitment I have is to be responsive, to be available, to be, I guess there's an element of perfect, right? To get it perfect. Ooh, that one hit hard. So what are your competing commitments? Write those down if you have any there. I like this adding them into the chat too. So please feel free to add them in the chat too, if that works well for you. What are you committed to? So in this next step, I'm making some big assumptions when I do this. I'm assuming a lot of things. I'm assuming my team expects me to create perfect experiences for us, right? I'm assuming if I tell people I can't meet right away, then they're going to think I'm not responsive enough. What else am I assuming? I'm assuming if I get it done earlier, it won't be the right thing. Or these maps are messy, so you're always thinking about it. So again, they don't have to be perfect. I'm assuming, and I'm thinking out loud in front of you. What else am I assuming? I think there's a big assumption in there that I'm assuming I have to be responsive to the moment, right? That I always have, like the meeting has to be responsive to the moment, the calendar has to be responsive to the moment. So I'm assuming that, and I'm assuming that I can't do that and have a meeting that's planned well in advance. Ooh. There it is. I think that's my big assumption that I need to work on there. I'm assuming that I can't be responsive to the moment and have a meeting that's planned well in advance. Go ahead and feel free to share your assumptions either in the chat or on your paper. Good information. Mark 2, that's a powerful one. Great. Now, once you have those big assumptions down, the challenge becomes to test them in the world. So are there any examples in the world that prove your assumption not to be true? Or at least not to always be true? Just for an example with mine, I'm assuming I can't be responsive to the moment and have a well-planned meeting agenda in advance. Okay. Have I been to meetings that have been responsive to the moment and had a well-planned agenda in advance? I think I have, right? I remember I had a professor who was phenomenal at this, like, just a lot of things. Particularly, I'm thinking of George Floyd and when that happened in the world, and the way the professor pivoted from a very well-planned lesson to take care of our needs in that moment was such a good example for me of how you can have a plan and you can pivot, right? And you can be responsive to the moment. And that plan didn't go away for the work that we did together as we moved forward. That plan was still very valuable and we were able to come back to it. And yet we were responsive to the moment in that. So there are some big things out there that challenge my assumptions. And so my next step in this process would be to test this in small ways, to see how it affects me and others. And so, the thing about this, like for mine doesn't seem like a really earth-shattering one here, like it's not, but some of you might have things written down that testing that in the world might be a lot more deep, right? Like there might be some risks. So how can you test it in ways that are safe? Baisha, am I saying it right, Baisha? Yes? Okay. Thank you so much for sharing yours, because I keep thinking about it in my head. And that's one that's really like to test in the world there's a challenge, right? Because it's students, it's young people, and you don't want to hurt anybody, right? And so that is probably going to be always the thing that's pulling you away from giving that critique or feedback, because you don't want to hurt anyone, right? And so thinking about it, what are some ways that you could test giving feedback that helps people grow in safe ways that aren't going to harm young people or relationships or anything like that? Maybe it is working with somebody to get permission and say, like, I'm going to work on doing this. Can I practice this with you? Or doing small, like just small things, like working with students and saying, I'm going to give 3 positives and feedback for growth or something, or I'm going to take some steps to research how other people do this, right? And so there's a lot of different ways to test your assumption in the world. If I test this, what do I find? So mine might be that I'm going to start by setting, oh gosh, it makes me anxious when I think of doing this. So that shows that this is really scary stuff for us, even though it sounds like a meeting agenda is such a simple thing, but it sounds really scary. So if I say I'm going to set a deadline for when I'm going to have the meeting agenda prepared for the next, leadership team meeting. Like by Friday, I'm going to have a posted agenda for our Tuesday meeting, because we meet every week. That sounds very easy. And for me, it just rattles everything in me to think about it, like to set that boundary, that expectation for myself. But that might be something that I think that is something I'm going to have to try to do in this next week and start doing that. The thing is, who I am as a leader has gotten me to where I am today. I'm superintendent because I've been very responsive, right? I care about people. I take the time. As a teacher, I was very adaptive to the student needs. And so I had to find those ways to be all of those things in this space. I see a question in here. How do we understand feedback and its purpose? Heather, you want to expand a little?
Well, I was just thinking about your question about giving feedback and just exploring about how, when we think about restorative practice, we all have different perspectives. And we start with really examining ourselves and thinking about how do we think about feedback and what kind of feedback, how we have received feedback in our life, what's been the way we've been taught. And so
Yeah.
how do we, how do we get underneath thinking about what is that, the way that we think, and then being honest with our students about how we see it and inviting them to think about it. And when I've worked with my students to create work and offer each other feedback, I always take time to teach them what feedback is from my perspective. And actually we start at, what do you think it is? What's your experience? What's worked, what hasn't worked? This is what my experience is. This is what I'm thinking is, and this is how we're going to do it. And so that way we've all kind of, when we look at our community agreements as well, and we look at how does giving feedback tie into that community agreement. So that's what I was thinking about, why I wrote that question.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. And what you shared, like, it really goes to the heart of the immunity to change process too, is like so much of what we think, like what these big assumptions are rooted in, a lot of times our family experiences, how we experience feedback as a child, how we experience. I realized when you said that for me, growing up as a military child and in a pretty volatile environment, like things changed often. Like there was never a plan that didn't get changed. Like, and I had to always be, just I have an assumption in my head that things are going to change. And that is very rooted in that childhood thing. And it makes me a flexible person. It makes me, able to adapt to change really well. And yet it makes it very challenging for me to set those boundaries around myself so that other people can feel safe, because for what is comfortable for me, change and adaptivity is comfortable for me, for other people is really terrifying and immobilizing at times, right? And so being able to provide the things that other people need and the things that I need is really key to leadership there. Did anybody else want to share any big assumptions there? So the thing I wrote on here is, in doing your immunity change process, did you have any aha moments for this work that you're trying to do as a team, as a district, as an individual, right? So as you're thinking about trying to lead the change in these principles or this character development, did you have any aha moments about yourself or your team in leading this change by doing the mapping process? Take a couple moments to just reflect on that and write some reflections in the chat there. I loved that, Kristen, what you shared about the changes in your school community and realizing that everybody will be bringing some big assumptions, and that it's going to take a lot of grace and patience to be aware of that and to help each other through it. I think that's the power of the circle process too, is that it, in the community space, right now we're doing kind of an internal circle process like our own, but when you use the restorative practices in a community space, a lot of those assumptions and values and fears are brought to light with your peers or with your students. And so it challenges those assumptions on a daily basis, right? Like what you thought was the person's reason for acting a certain way, you start to understand that maybe there's a different reason that they're carrying that. And maybe it's a very well-intentioned reason. I am sure that my team at times have thought that I am like flaky or inconsistent or, impulsive because I'm waiting till the last minute to do this. And they haven't known my heart around the reasoning here and what a struggle that is for me to do it the way that I need to do it better to get to those goals. And so that circle process and even being here with you today gave me a chance to uncover that for myself, and hopefully for you all to hear some of that from each other also, to kind of understand that everybody is bringing those assumptions to the table. And so I hope that this work is work that you can dig into a little bit more. You're always free to reach out to me if you have questions about it. There is a book called The Immunity to Change Process written by Lisa Leahy and Robert Keegan, that outlines that process in a more detailed way. But if nothing else, I hope that you continue to practice that internal reflection about what you're trying to do, what might be getting in your way, what assumptions you can test, and how it can help you to improve those individual practices that'll get you to those greater goals of those 11 principles that you're hoping to get to as a team. So thank you for sharing that little bit of time with me today. I'll pass it back to Heather.
Thank you, Tina. All right, Tina. Woohoo! Thank you. I just feel like doing that. So as somebody who is on Tina's team, what I can say is this kind of leadership, leading from the inside out and being very transparent about what's going on within, in service of supporting other people in doing the same work, is really, really powerful. And so we sat as a team and did some immunity to change work around some really big shifts that we're making district-wide, because we understand that in order for us to work through change with a larger group, it's important for us to work with ourselves. So there's two things that we want to do, three actually, before we go to lunch. So first of all, we want to just check in and see what questions you might have, and you're welcome to throw those in the chat or on mic. And then secondly, I just want to do a bit of a reflection about how the day was designed so that you can understand how restorative practices cultivate a way of being, including how we cultivate character development within ourselves and within our community. So I want to lay that out for you really explicitly. So when you're thinking about designing learning, designing spaces, you'll understand our intentions. And then lastly, I have a really nice nugget that I want to share with you about creating. And then my beloved Iman is going to close. So what questions do you have about anything that we've experienced today that you'd like to ask now?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. This is Kat from Woodland School. I had a question about being able to use a circle for the purpose of doing a restorative conversation after some sort of like an incident has happened. For me, I think my biggest struggle is figuring out what are the useful questions to ask, especially ones that don't get the students riled up again if it was a very heated thing that happened.
I guess I'd like to speak to that. So in doing this work today, we started intentionally with the first circle, the inner circle within ourselves. And then we worked with all of us together to recognize that we all have so much to offer as part of this community, doing community building and connecting hearts. And so one of the things I want to say before even jumping into repair harm circle work, it's really important to find ways to continue to create community. And when there is a harm that's happened, there's important steps, and I'm telling you, there's ways to approach the work, but also there's this flexibility within the process. But this is something that I think is very important when doing repair harm work. When, let's say there's an issue between two people, right? So it's important that you have facilitators who reflect the identity of the people who will feel comfortable with the facilitators, right? Will have the kind of relationship that will create a safe space. And then you want to do pre-work. So sit down with one person first and talk about what happened, so they have an opportunity to share their story. What happened, the facts of what happened. It's very important to get that out of our bodies to be heard. How have you been affected? How did this affect you? And sometimes, people are talking about feelings, but not everybody knows how to talk about what they're feeling necessarily. And some of us have that practice and some don't. So way into that is getting at, how has this affected you? And then thinking about how has this affected other people? And then what would make this better for you? And what are you willing to do? And you do that separately, right? And you ask both people separately. You explain to them, I'm having the same conversation with the other person, and you don't share what was said by the other person unless you have permission. And then you talk about the process and you say, so now that we've had this conversation and I've had a conversation with the other person, or I will be having the same conversation, would you be willing to sit in a circle with them? And it will create a space. We're not going to try to decide who's right or who's wrong. We're going to give everybody a chance to talk about what happened for them, the facts of what happened, right? Everyone to tell their story, how they've been affected, how others have been affected. And then think about what can people do moving forward. When people hear about how their actions have affected each other and think about and hear what people say will help them in moving forward, then it gives people an opportunity to say, what will they do or be willing, what will they do to actually do sorry, not just say sorry, but actually do an action that will be helpful and that supporting that person's healing, right? What support do they need, right? Because before we even get to the repair harm circle, we got to look at like, what was going on with you in the first place that this happened? Like, what are you really needing, right? And in order for us to be able to take responsibility, it's important for us to understand what we need first, take care of what we need, and then we can move into that space. If we don't do these steps, a lot of times shame will come into the space, right? And then a lot surfaces and it can be harmful. And so you want people to be able to take responsibility for what they've created and agree to come to the space. And they can bring a person who will support them, not the messy friend, but a friend who's going to support them and really being present and feel comfortable, and even members from the community who have been affected. And then you hold a circle with those same questions. You hold a circle, or you could hold a conversation. This can look whatever way works best, but the intention is for each person to be heard. What happened again? How have you been affected? How are others affected? What can make this better for you, right? And what are you willing to do? And then you sign an agreement and you talk about when can we meet again? And then you do a reflection. What are you walking away with as we're leaving the circle today? Or what's something you learned about yourself? Whatever question serves to help people to reflect and help you also understand, and then put it in the calendar and do a check-in. We have like an agreement that people will sign, and they write down what they are agreeing to by when, and then we follow up. And if people don't do what they said they were going to do, then we say, what happened? Like, what do you need? Where are you at? And also in the case where people have been bullied or there has been some other egregious harm, we don't put people back together unless the person who was bullied feels comfortable with that. And if that person doesn't feel comfortable, we never force that. And we invite somebody who has moved through a similar experience to be a surrogate and be in that space to talk about their experience, so the person who has caused harm can feel that. And then this process closes once that kind of follow-up has happened. But it's very, very important. It can be very injurious to people if we just get thrown into a circle space and there's no pre-work. So if you do that pre-work with great intentionality and it takes time, it will work beautifully. And I want to say this, I've seen this happen where it has taken us a year to get to the circle. And then if people don't want to participate in the circle, we don't force them. We work with people separately to support them and understanding what happened and what they need and how to move this forward and what repair looks like. And there was a situation, a circle I was sitting in, it took 30 years for someone to be able to move through this process. So I just want to say this is not something that's a force, but it's a very, I took a long time talking about it because I think it's very important to learn this work, to practice community building, and to learn how to hold repair harm circles and practice them so that we understand the work for ourselves when we're working with other people through the process.
I think, yeah, I'll add to that a little bit. I think building up to that safe space, part of it is using the community building pieces, right? Like, so if you're doing circles all the time for discussion, or, you're using it to help people get to know each other, or like the quote that inspired me in starting the Alliance School was, if you can see yourself in others, whom can you harm? Right? If you just think about it, if you can see yourself in others, whom can you harm? So if you know things about people, if you know kind of their why, their history, their experience, then you're less likely to make assumptions or get angry or all of those pieces, So if you're using the circles on a regular basis, or it doesn't have to be in a circle either, it can be a classroom process that just gives everybody in the class a chance to speak and answer a question, or, class, small group, anything. The more people know each other, the less likely they are to cause harm, and the more likely they are to come to those repair harm circles with the intent of fixing things. Like, we would often have students come to us and say, I need a circle because I want to get this fixed with my friend. Or most of the things that are happening in schools are conflict, right? They're not, and kids don't know how to solve those conflicts. So they want us to help them facilitate those spaces to solve that conflict. So, I mean, there are high school students, and I imagine students of all ages, but I think a lot of times high school students who can go a whole school year and not know the names or one significant fact about anybody else in their class, right? Think about that. If a student can make it through the whole year without knowing one significant thing, of course there's going to be conflict. Of course there's going to be issues because people don't have that understanding. So how do you create opportunities for people to know each other well so that when you need to do repair harm, they're ready?
Renette, you talked about having space for, like being inclusive doesn't necessarily mean that we all agree. And I think when you're in community with people, you can hold that I love and respect this person and I understand their values, and we have divergent perspectives about this, and we're both going to have a space to share that and what we believe. Iman Amina, do you want to say anything about repair harm work?
Yeah, I just wanted to give more of like a, I guess, student perspective. I did recently graduate high school in 2022, but something that struck me was, Tina, when you were saying how like a lot of students can go like a year without knowing a significant fact or like even the name of like their peers. That is very accurate, and I've like experienced that, and I've seen that it creates this level of like impersonal, like not being seen by like peers, and it creates kind of a divide, and where you only see people for like their surface level qualities. And that kind of goes into like creating like, I guess, more like cliques, and like that kind of can foster a divide and like kind of a dislike for other like peers and like people, and there's no like really sense of community. That like destroys the sense of community, which is really sad to me, because people like seclude, or like they like kind of like section off into their own little groups that they feel comfortable in, instead of like branching out and like being able to connect with their peers. And I think that restorative practice like fosters this like space where you are able to build community and you are able to connect with your peers on a deeper level. And I've seen it in with my own two eyes and my own like various school communities. And like it's a very powerful tool, and especially like with restorative practice specifically in terms of like repairing harm. In terms of repairing harm, like I found that the sense of community and like camaraderie is stronger after the repair harm circle, because the people are able to like have this conflict and then have it worked out, and then like after going through all, there's a new level of understanding that people have with each other. So it's a really powerful process.
Thank you, Iman. I want to respond to the questions around scalability and also involving staff and having this be not just kind of like a dump session. And so in terms of scalability, I also want to share this idea with Tina. So it's great having a leader who understands restorative practice. So I can go to Tina and say, so here's this idea I have. And so for next school year, as we open the Cudahy School District, the vision that I have is that our young people who are learning to do this work and the grown people who are learning to do this work will be co-facilitators. So I want to work with the young people to create a presentation and that they will facilitate, right? and also create circles, and that we as a whole district then will be broken out into small circles holding the same circles, led by a young person supported by an adult circle keeper. And so that everybody, and we have how many people in the district, Tina? You're muted.
Students, we have 2,100 students and 400 staff.
Well,
About
this opening day will be with the 400 staff and the young people. The vision is that they will be facilitating. It's important that as adults that we learn this work, so that we are doing this work and are holding this space. And then our young people can walk with us, work with us, and we can step back and trust and know, because we trust the process, that they will learn through the process and be in the process. So anyways, we're going to scale it up so that all 400 people will be in a space being held by a young person facilitating that circle. And I'm thinking about like a gallery walk afterwards, something that we can post up, some kind of action or intention that relates to our theme, that people can then walk around the building and see what other people were doing in circle as a way of creating closure. So I think it's beautiful when you're having, like we had some really small circles today with 3 people. A nice sweet number if you have a team is like 8 people. If you have a staff, we use this work at Alliance when we were going through a big transition, when Tina went on to pursue higher education, with our staff of, gosh, I don't know how many people.
18.
We broke down.
18, I think it was at the time.
Yeah, so thank you, Tina. So we broke into groups of, grouped into different circles and working on different pieces that were important, and then kind of came back together. So I think this process can be used in many ways, and it doesn't have to look the same way.
Yeah.
Tina or Iman, do you want to say anything about that piece? And I want to talk about the staff circles, because that's an important piece too.
Yeah, I think that was the piece I was going to just say a little bit, is like that connection with staff. And like, I would always start with using this with the adults. Like, it's great. I mean, if you're in individual classrooms and you can use this with your students, that's great. But as a leader in this context, and in any context I've been in, I always have this sense that whatever the culture is with your adults is what the culture will be with your students. And so if you can really build that culture with the adults, that's going to trickle down and affect the students in a much stronger way. And at Alliance, the way we knew each other because of the circles that we did together, and was really powerful, and it made us better leaders as a group.
I definitely do want to add that in my experience, I've noticed that smaller groups like naturally tend to be more intimate circles. And not that you can't have intimacy with like a bigger group, but just like I've noticed that smaller groups do tend to have a different kind of sense of intimacy, just because, I don't know, it feels like people get to talk more, like people aren't as afraid to address a small group as they are like a large group, especially with like vulnerable stories. So I would take that into consideration when planning circles. But in bigger circles, like with a larger amount of people, tend to be like, they can still be powerful and moving and intimate, but just like there is a level of like consciousness that you are speaking to a bigger group of people. And like me myself, I'm someone who's a bit more on the introverted side, so I do have an appreciation for smaller groups. So I think also thinking about what are your students like tendencies and like personal, like I guess like preferences when it comes to that. Like, are they more introverted? Are they more shy? Are they more extroverted? Would they do better in a smaller group or like a bigger group? But those are definitely good things to think about.
Thank you, you two. I was thinking about, working with staff and how, this work that we do can be really challenging on so many levels, right? And so there are things that are just really hard. And I think we all need a space to put that. And so I think there's different strategies that you can use that I have found really helpful. And Tina and Imani, I look forward to what you have to say about this as well. But when I'm thinking about crafting the circle space, we're really thinking about what do you want them to reflect on? And what kind of space do you want to potentially take for action? If people are in a space where you're concerned that there's a lot of complaining, what I hear in complaints is that there's a need. And so I like to create a space for people to have an opportunity to reflect, and sometimes an opportunity to journal in the space of a circle can be a very powerful way to, even those questions I was saying, like what's been going on for you, have you been affected? What would support you in moving forward? What are you willing to do and what support do you need? Even if you have people begin by reflecting on those questions prior to the circle, and really invite people, you can even just say, like in a word or a sentence, what's been most challenging about this situation? What's been one of the challenges? And you can invite people to distill their answers down after doing some journaling so that they can do that processing within themselves, but still be heard, right? And then also inviting people into action, right? Recognizing that we all have power. And so, what will I take responsibility for in creating the situation? Now, when certain things happen, I didn't necessarily create that, but what am I responsible for? I'm responsible for how I respond to that. And the way that I respond to that has to do with how the situation has affected me, right? As well as what's within me. I think, Renette, was it you who quoted Stephen Covey talking about, like, we see the world as we are, right? And so that is very much central to this work. But I think what's important as a collective, if you create a space for people to talk about what's happening, also engaging people in what you can do collectively, where everybody just says one thing. What's one challenge? What's one thing that's going well? What's one thing you're going to do? What support you need? When can we get back together and meet about this? It's a way to get people into action, and also play games and have fun. Like Tina we were dancing in one of our cabinet meetings. So have fun and play. I love theater games. Teampedia.com has tons of theater games, and you can relate them to the theme of the circle or whatever you're doing. I do this in my classroom. I'm like that crazy teacher. I do this with our staff, but it is such a beautiful way to learn about yourselves and learn about each other and connect.
I was going to say, don't forget the games, Heather. Talk about the games. Any games, especially, that give everybody an opportunity to say or do something. It's just really powerful.
And I'll just add, the beginning of the school year, my first day in Cudahy, we had the school board, all the directors and all the principals in one big circle. And one of my former students, Joyce Allen, and I facilitated that circle. We played a game called Jedi Mind Trick. Tina, how many people were in that circle?
I think there were about 24 people in that circle between, administrators and the school board.
So if you imagine all these folks like standing up, so we had them standing in a big circle, one person in the middle, and people across the circle have to make eye contact with each other and switch places. And the person in the middle's job is to try to get to one of their spaces. And it's such a wonderful way to shift the energy, shake the group up, and just kind of get things together. So I just wanted to add that.
And people who are very serious, most of the time we're laughing together, and that's powerful in itself. And then Heather will often ask the question after we play a game. And I love this, and I've used this a lot too, whether it's a game or something else. What did you notice about yourself or others while playing that game? And that's really powerful in getting people to know each other well too.
And what's so great about this process, it really, like, the practice of circle cultivates this way of being. And Iman, could I just refer back to kind of what you had said to me when you were returning back to school about, how you wanted to reconnect with friends and that the process, would you be willing to talk about that? Because you've so internalized this process that you're just using it really effortlessly.
I don't exactly remember which scenario you're talking about, so feel free to just go ahead.
Okay. So confidentiality is really important. It's always important to check in with people. So Iman, you have really good friends whom you've known since elementary school, and you came back and you said, Mom, I really want to hold a circle with people individually and connect with them. You didn't say hold a circle. That was me saying that. You just said, I want to have individual conversations with people and then bring us all back together. And I was thinking there's that process just living in you. And that made me so happy for you.
Yeah. Basically like Heather said, so I have friends from like my home city that I've been friends with for a long time. And obviously like we're all at these kind of crossroads point in our lives where we're all like becoming our own people and like going to college and like moving out and stuff. And as a result, like we kind of had a bit of a disconnection for a while, or we weren't able to all talk to each other, and there were like some miscommunications that were coming up. So like the first thing I did was like, I was like, well, I need to talk to each of these people individually and like tell them my feelings and like why this is making me sad and why this is making me frustrated. And then we're gonna like all come together and like have a group talk so we can all like voice our grievances, I guess you could say. But yeah, that was definitely like a very effective method. And like I think the reason why I've stayed friends and like I've stayed friends with these people for so long and value them so much is because we are able to like communicate in a way that is like really effective. And I definitely do use restorative practice to do that. So it's like, it's without even like noticing, my subconscious like pulls it into my every aspect of life. So it is a wonderful thing. Yes.
Okay, you all, as a mama, I'm doing such a dance inside right now, because I will say that this has been a part of my children's lives since they were little. And so there was a point and they were time like, Mom, no thank you to you and your circles and the restorative practice and all the things, and no thank you. But what's so cool is to see, just by having this way of being, we sit around the dinner table, everybody shares space, everybody has a voice, we talk about that really consciously. And so, you know, I bring all this back to you as we close up this part of our day, that this really, really, really cultivates this way of being. And I just want to take a moment to just kind of reflect on how this morning has gone. So when you think about how we did the day today, we started with that circle within ourselves, right? That meditation. Well, actually, before that, I asked you to think about, what do you want to focus on? Really, where do you want to lay your intentions? And we're going to go back to those, the Padlet in the beginning, so you can check in with what you started with. But we set this intention, we started within ourselves, working with the stories within ourselves. Then we connected with the larger circle, with the community circle, and thinking about how do we move through this work, and recognizing that there's so much wisdom in every person. We all are our own healers, we know, and also we can learn so much from each other by sharing our stories and listening to each other's stories. So there's so much power in that. We wanted you to benefit from that experience. And then we went into this really powerful work at looking at our own resistance to change, and recognizing that we are the only people who can change ourselves, and we are responsible for the actions that we take. And as leaders, it starts with us. And that willingness to be, Tina, the way that you led that process is very reflective of restorative practice, that willingness to be honest, to be vulnerable, and you get to share what you want to share. You don't have to share what you don't want to share. And you can choose an example, like Tina, you were saying, it was such a small example, but became so profound because it connects to something deeper, right? And so this is what the work of restorative practice is. We are all connected. And so if you look back at the Padlet, I want you to take a moment and look at what you said you were going to focus on. And then I'm going to share my screen and just point you to a couple of pieces as we close the day. Okay, everybody, I want to just focus you back on the part where I'm sharing my screen. Right underneath our centerpiece for today, there is an image, a link to Gaia.com, and I will refer to that in a moment. But there's a question here. There's some questions, and it's under Be, Do, Have. And this is a thank you to Valori Thomas, who's a wonderful coach with whom I worked when I was engaging in a program with an organization called Every Black Girl. It was such a powerful process. And one of the things that Valori really talked us about is, how do we be? How must we be in order to do what we want to create? And the work that I asked you to do when we were doing the meditation, I asked you to really think about how you recreate that story and how you be that, right? And what I want to invite you to do as you look at the work that you're going to create in your community, what is it that you want to create? And if you give yourself time in a space of meditation, and that could be drawing, writing, moving, what will it feel like in your being when that is created? And without thinking about any of the details, how will it feel when it exists? What will you think about, what will you see, what will you feel, what will you do? Just really sit with that. And once you have that, offering gratitude that that exists, you literally create a neural pathway that will guide you into that work. So when we think about setting up this immunity to change work, how do you be as you are doing that work? And then you look at how do you celebrate what you have created. So I want to invite you to think about that and check out this link with Joe Dispenza, as he talks about really the power that we have to create. So we are such creators, and it has been just a pleasure to work with all of you. And I'm going to stop sharing here, Iman, and I'm going to hand it over to you, my love, to close us out.
All right, so to close out, I will be doing in LACCS, the poem I recited earlier to open, and I will be reciting it first in English and then in Spanish. And I just want to preface and say I am not a native Spanish speaker, so I will be doing the best that I can. You are my other me. If I do harm to you, I do harm to myself. If I love and respect you, I love and respect myself. Tú eres mi otro yo. Si te hago daño a ti, me hago daño a mí mismo. Si te amo y respeto, me amo y respeto yo. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so very much for your generosity. And this is a poem by Luis Valdez. It's on the Padlet link. There's a little link. That's what this means. Okay, everybody, we are off to lunch. We will see you at 1 o'clock. Tina, Iman, thank you so much. LACCS team, you are a bunch of rock stars. I feel like I'm getting all these text messages from the team and all these suggestions and like all this help. So much going on. I feel like, I got all this excitement. Julie, anything we need to know before we go to lunch, or Ronette or anyone?
Actually, yes, just come back after lunch, everyone, and be prepared. I'll probably set up breakout rooms so that you can join the room that you're supposed to go into. But for those who are, this is your stop off point and you're entering into another space, please know that the breakout spaces, the small group spaces, will not be restarting. Okay, they are continuing on with their journey. And you will need to introduce yourself to your new community if that's your choice. But for those who are staying on and staying in their spaces, wonderful. That's how we designed it. Next year, you can make all new choices. So enjoy your lunch. We will see you all back soon, shortly. Thank you so much.
I just want to say thank you so much to everyone for your participation in whatever way was nurturing for you. So the conversation and the holding of a space was very, very rich. So I'm grateful for your willingness to be present with yourself, be present with us, and be present with what you see for your community. And I love when there's young people. Hello. Thank you very much. Julie, I'm going to hand it to you for housekeeping.
Great. Thank you very much, Heather. It was a wonderful day. We are going to be going into our workspace with our coaches. And I did drop the evaluation in the chat once again. We really appreciate your feedback. It helps us plan our upcoming sessions because we want to be responsive to your needs. And there is a question in the chat, or not a question in the evaluation about your breakout too. So that helps us give that information back to those coaches leading breakouts. So please do take a few minutes, complete the evaluation for today, and then you can be dismissed from your workspace after you're done with your work time. Our next retreat getting together is February 2nd, and we will be having a wonderful session with Future and another representative from Castle, right? And that is going to be on SEL. So I hope you'll be able to join us for that really engaging day. So, and And then just in final closing, thank you one more time, Heather. Great day.